Good morning, everybody. I'm Lisa Dunn. I am the chair of the Orange County Realtors Fair Housing and Member Inclusion Committee, and we are so happy that you're joining us today for our forum on ageism, ableism, and veterans. Groups that really don't normally get the spotlight like a lot of other protected classes, but they're just as important, if not more so, especially when it comes to doing our business in a day-to-day manner. But I want to welcome our two panelists, two guests, two very special guests. And first, I'm going to start off with Karen Trollin. And she is a fellow CAR director. I've been so blessed to get to know her over the past couple of years. And she's a broker associate with the Trollin Group at Christie's International. And I'm going to let Karen tell you a little bit about herself before I introduce our next guest.
Thank you, Lisa. Super excited to be here. Thanks for including us and your kind words about our silent community. And I call them silent. As you know, being in CAR director, being super involved in organized real estate, we think we know about fair housing. But it wasn't until I was in a plane crash as the pilot in the Lake Tahoe Mountains. My medical term, because I'm a ski patroller, is I was smushed. And now my residual 16 years later, I'm still in a wheelchair. So it opens up in the understanding of life is different. And, it's been fun for me because I've been a top agent, I've been a broker manager, I've been a real regional manager, and I actually have stepped back and am being an agent again. So it gives you such a different perspective looking at all different sides. They always say, walk the shoes. You just don't really understand. I didn't. I thought I did, but you can't wing it. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, and for all of you guys out there, if you're on social media at all, follow Karen Trollin. And excuse my language, this woman is a badass and she just does not let anything stop her. And she's such an inspiration. So we're so fortunate to have you here with us today. And speaking of another inspirational, well, I'll quit using those words I shouldn't use. We have one of my friends, Rajat Jetley of Cross Country Mortgage, and he's here to talk with us about veterans and active military. So, Jet, why don't you give us a little bit of information about you?
Sure. So my name's Rajat Jetley. Most people call me Jet. I'm currently at Cross Country Mortgage, where I'm the branch manager for the Irvine branch. I've been in the industry for about 8 years now. I'm originally from Hawaii, a state that I'm still licensed in. So a lot of my business in my early years was VA loans specifically. And I noticed, and I was glad that it actually worked out that way because since coming to and living in California, I found that there's actually fewer VA loans here. So if I had not learned how to do what I did back then, I probably would not be able to do it as effectively now. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And you work with both veterans and active military, correct?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. Okay. And just so people know a little bit about me too, I've been involved in the fair housing arena for a few years. I was one of the founders of a group called Deliberately Fair Housing. And we did a lot of work, especially during the pandemic, trying to bring awareness to the different protected classes out there. And one of the things that I've seen over time is ageism. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But my personal story, has been where I have kind of all of these things have kind of intersected, which we'll talk more about intersectionality in a little bit. But I've walked a little bit in all of these shoes. And I've also seen how unintentionally we treat people based on their age. So with that, let's talk a little bit more about the demographics out there. And I'll kind of start it off just a little bit about the ageism, because something that I see a lot of is we treat different generations as monoliths. It's wonderful that we have these cute little tag names, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, baby boomers. I just found out there's one called, there's a part of the baby boomers called Generation Jones, which I guess I'm a member of, which is the people born in the 60s that are still baby boomers. However, people look at these groups and just assume that you are of a certain age, therefore, this is what you do. And how we treat people based on our own biases is something that I want to talk about with those groups today. And from that, I'm going to move to Karen. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the demographic that you are intimately familiar with?
Thank you. And as I start, ageism falls into our category quite a bit. So if I use the topic differently able, and by the way, CAR has a forum group called Differently Able group. So again, if you want more information, they meet about quarterly, so really fun to be part of. But basically, differently abled people have different abilities, whether it's physical or cognitive. And do you understand that sometimes these abilities you cannot see? Yes, as you think of people, I'm what's called a paraplegic, which interestingly enough, people don't even know what that means. Para means I have two working limbs, which are my arms. My legs don't work. A quad is both arms and legs don't work. But it also, there's a lot of other things that put you as a person that who uses equipment. So wheelchairs and more with ageism, you see a lot of walkers. That totally affects usability in a home. Um, think about, well, first I should say, words, names keep changing. So the proper thing to say now, we used to think of blind. Now it's called vision impaired. Deaf is hearing impaired. And again, people using wheelchairs or walkers. However, as I mentioned, there's a lot that goes into the cognitive function, and they also have needs.
Wonderful. And Jet, why don't we discuss the group that you do a lot of work with?
Sure. So a lot of my businesses, veterans, either active duty or since retired, and I, I will tell you straightforwardly, out of all the groups of um, clients that I work with, veterans are by far my favorite. They're always so polite, so grateful, and frankly, like extremely organized, which makes my life as a mortgage loan officer considerably easier. And I've found from experience, I was very surprised by this because since I had always done so many VA loans, I just assumed that everybody liked VA loans and everybody accepted VA loans and everybody liked working with veterans. And it wasn't until I got a little bit into my career that I realized that was not the case. And I realized the bulk of that was due to just misinformation or just a lack of knowledge, fear of the unknown. You know, a listing agent had never worked with a VA loan before, so they just assumed that it wouldn't be a good one, and they would rather work with something that they're more comfortable with, which, you know, from a business perspective seems fine, but from like a personal perspective, it's just unfortunate that the veterans are basically treated like second class citizens, like simply for trying to use a benefit that they're, you know, legally entitled to, that they worked hard to have the ability to have.
Absolutely. And the VA loan is the best loan project out there. And, you know, it's a shame that more people are not encouraged to take advantage of these benefits that they so rightly earned. Well, and one thing that's interesting with the three different groups that we're talking about is there's a certain amount of intersectionality between the three. And Karen, why don't we start off with you? What's something that, you know, the differently abled group, how does ageism come into play, and how does the active military and veteran world intersect with yours?
So great thoughts. And, you know, to me, it's really fascinating to follow up with Jet. I'm in Silicon Valley, and we rarely did VA loans, not so much because of misinformation. The loan limits were so low that most VAs couldn't afford getting anything. So them raising the limits and, you know, the programs are so much better. That has really helped. But, you know, I think I was going on a listing presentation. Remember, I'm in a wheelchair. I went to the listing house and they had a ramp, which was great. So I could get into the single story house, and I'll talk about steps later. But as I went in, my client, who was 99, very with it, but used a walker. She only could walk with a walker. And she told me when I get in the door, stop, because I'll go over the edge. It was one of those old school ranches that had the drop down living room. And if I went too fast in the door, I'd end up on the floor. But here I am in a chair and she is with a walker. And if she moved an inch over, she would be on the floor as she greeted me at the doorway. So there's so much intersection, whether it's age or different abilities. And I hate to bring this up too, but we have a lot of Alzheimer's going on, and that tends to be age related, not always. But again, that can change needs and wants as well. So there is so much overlap. And the last part of it, as people using equipment get older, it's more difficult for them to use the equipment too. So it adds a whole nother level.
Absolutely. And Jet, what about you? What kind of intersectionality are you seeing, between the ageism group and the differently abled? Because the veterans in the active military, they cover a pretty broad range of folk.
No, that's. I mean, there's definitely a lot of overlap between well, all aspects of it, like the ageism, the differently abled, and the veterans. I mean, one of the most common ones is I actually have a lot of veterans who initially reach out to me and they apologize for potentially wasting my time. They're like, I'm very sorry to even bother you. I probably didn't qualify for anything. Really, the only money that I have coming to me is my disability paychecks and my retirement, from the military. And I have to point out to them that they're actually incorrect, because in a lot of instances, I've done quite a few loans for veterans where the only qualifying income was their retirement and their disability paychecks, and they've qualified for absolutely fine homes like all across the United States. But because they're not traditionally employed, I guess I'll use the word, because they don't have like a job, a 9 to 5 that they go to all day, every day. Like, people just have put thoughts in their head that, well, of course you're not going to be able to get a loan. Like, what bank is going to lend you money if you don't even have a job? Like, or a lot of them have the other odd thoughts where they'll call me and be like, well, I'm old. They're like, I'm 65. Will you guys even lend it to me? Because, what if I'm not around for 30 years to like pay for this mortgage? And I'm like, that's not how it works. You could be 101 and we'd still give you a 30-year mortgage. We don't base time constraints based on your actual age and whatnot. So, yeah.
Well, and something that's interesting is neither one of you touched on that both of your communities can be young people as well.
Yeah.
And, the active military, they qualify for the VA loan benefits, even though they're not veterans, they're still active military, and they have the opportunity to use those as well. And we have people from all ages with accessibility situations that you can see. And then we have a lot of people that you can't see, especially in the veteran community. We have so much of the psychological disability due to what a lot of our veterans have been put through in the various wars, that it sticks with me to this day. I was holding an open house and I had a gentleman come in, and it was a condo, and the first words were, is this condo VA approved? Because I'm a veteran, I'm a disabled veteran, but you can't see my disability. And I mean, to this day, and that was probably 20 years ago, it sticks with me like it was yesterday. Because just because we can't see your disability doesn't mean you don't have one. And that can be of people of all ages. And it could be a family member when you're dealing with somebody who has a child with special needs, of whatever kind of special needs those may be. That we have to realize sometimes it's not the person that we're talking to, but there's family members that we need to take into consideration as well. And, talking about those, specific needs that people need, on the particular communities that we're talking about, everybody needs to be served a little bit more special, shall I say. And it's just like we're going to treat a first-time buyer different than we're going to treat a repeat buyer. They're all of our clients, but people have different needs that they have to have served. And Jed, I'm going to start with you. What's one of the things that your community, how can we better serve them as
Um,
realtors as well as loan
yeah,
officers?
no, I know that's, I mean, so as silly as it sounds, I feel like the most important thing that people can do is just have more of an open mind and leave any preconceived notions behind. Because I feel like, I mean, I've joked about it over the years, and I usually get most cynical right around like days like Memorial Day or Fourth of July and whatnot. And I'll tell my realtor friends like, can you not like talk about how proud you're of the realtors if you would never accept an offer from them on your listing? Like, like
Oh, you mean the veterans?
yeah, yeah.
You should be accepting offers from
No, but
realtors.
that's what I mean. Like every Fourth of July, every Memorial Day, like every real estate professional, like every bank, every lender will put up like big social media posts about like we support our veterans, and I'll see people write stuff like that. We support our veterans, and I remember thinking like I don't know about that. My client made an offer in your listing and it wasn't even looked at. So maybe more of the support should come in the sense of just giving them a fair shot at the ability to also like purchase these places. So it's mostly just about keeping like an open mind about and learning more about what the programs are, and as well as what you were saying, like there's instances with veterans where people are like. I mean, it sounds so weird to say, but sometimes people don't think about it as they say it out loud. They're like, "Well, I can't tell what your disability is," and I'm like, "Well, that's not really here or there to say. Like, you don't ask questions like
Yeah,
that."
you don't question it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's an interesting point that you bring up, especially, and again, talking about intersectionality. My husband was a Vietnam vet, and he passed away a couple of years ago, but I definitely got familiar with accessibility issues during that time. And, it's interesting how from the veteran aspect, how little the realtor community knows about how to properly, represent a buyer using VA loan products, what you have to do and how close you have to work with that lender to be sure you're covering the cost if you're asking for costs and this and that. There's so many fine points, but once you learn it,
right.
it's super easy. And if you're going to be listing properties, you darn well better know about all of the good things about a VA loan. There's so many myths that are going on out there about them, that this is this and that's that. I bought my last home on a VA loan and we closed in less than 30 days. Everything was good. It was easy peasy. We've used our VA benefits a couple of times. But it's just that lack of knowledge within our community. And, we were talking earlier about how it doesn't matter how long you've been in this business. You need to be learning something new every day. And hopefully from this conversation, you may want to say, hey, Jet, can you tell me a little bit about what I need to know, or your favorite lender that does VA loans? And ask them, what do I need to know so I can better serve the VA community? Because there are no loan limits anymore. So, and before I get Karen involved in this conversation, but I'm sure Karen will love the story too. Jet, why don't you talk about the largest loan you've done for a VA buyer? Because we
Uh,
always think they don't have any money.
right. Yeah. So the largest loan I ever did for a VA buyer was he purchased a $2.5 million property, pretty much like right up near the water, um, completely no down payment, zero down. He is active duty. He's the gentleman was in charge of the Red Hill base for like a while, and he has since retired, and he's actually actively on the hunt for his new home, which I guess we'll see how much more expensive this next one is. But that is, it's like you said, a lot of people assume that veterans just don't have money. So I know that when I talk about VA loans, because there's a lot of loan officers, even that I chit chat with like day to day that do not do a lot of VA loans, and they'll ask me about my production, and I'll actually tell them truthfully that the average VA loan that I do is probably over 1.2 million. Like the average VA loan that I'm doing is like over 1.2 million. So they're buying homes that are just as nice and expensive as anybody else, and they have the income coming from either their regular jobs or their, retirement, disability, all sorts of stuff to be able to make these payments.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because you have money in the bank, why should you use it if you can do zero down? I mean, that's what we did. I
Mhm.
got into my last property for $1,200, and I kept my cash in the bank because why should I put it down when I don't have to?
That's a very common thing that I do, especially when the younger active duty members reach out to me. Like I'll tell you that so I have clients in the 8 years that I've done this where I helped them in my first year purchase a condo with zero down when they were maybe 24 or 25. And then they reached back out to me when they were 30 and married. And then they sold those condos that they'd purchased with no money down, which had now grown quite a bit in equity, and they purchased their new home, and they brought equity from the first home to make the payment on the second home like even more manageable for them. And I remember thinking like, man, I wish I was able to buy a house with no money that then appreciated by 300, $400,000. Like that would be amazing. Like it's like an infinite return on investment. Like here's nothing.
Yeah, it is.
Here's $400,000. Yeah. So yeah.
Voice of experience over here talking. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
wonderful. And you know what? It's great that we have that benefit for people that have given so much to this country. And Karen, how about your community? How can we better serve your community?
So, like Jet said, keep an open mind. As I say, get out of your own way. Get rid of those stereotypes and those assumptions. So, for examples, we think somebody sitting in a wheelchair is comfortable. Personally, I'm in pain all the time. Don't assume that sitting's a good thing. Our bodies aren't designed for that. Each differently able and ageism are different. So each one of us has different needs. The other huge thing, you talked about athletics. I'm actually part of a foundation filled with a lot of Paralympiads, believe it or not. And most all my friends are half my age, but super active, snow skiing, water skiing, sports, so on and so forth. But the founder of this foundation had a spinal injury and can walk a bit. So again, just at a glance, you wouldn't know that he's got challenges, but he does use a walker. I mean, not a walker, but a cane. But what he made a point to me, and it's so true. So many of us were taught you don't look at somebody that's got anything, I'm going to say unusual, a burn person, someone in a wheelchair, somebody with any kind of deformity. Out of respect, you don't look. But actually, that's the absolute opposite thing that you can do. You want to treat them with respect. You want to communicate with them because what happens, like, for example, my husband and I would be buying a house, you would naturally start talking to him, even though I'm the decision maker. You're going to lose us as clients because I'm the decision maker. But that is such a common thing where people talk to the caregiver or especially the one standing. And to take it further, kudos to Lisa. She always makes me feel good when I run into her because I'm in a wheelchair. I'm about half the height of somebody standing. And I go up to a group. Sometimes people don't even move over. They're all talking at their eye level. But guess what? I'm lower. They don't even acknowledge me. And if you come up talking to me one-on-one, where Lisa's so good, she'll grab a chair and come talk to me, or she'll squat. And I know squatting's not comfortable, but even if you do it for like a minute, that it's just like children. You want to be on their level. That makes them feel important. And I think that's probably the hardest thing with all of us that are differently abled, that acknowledgement. We want to be respected. We want that. And remember, we've got cognitive issues. So be sensitive, respectful, again, being a military wife, wasn't a very good military wife, but I love the military. And luckily, my middle son takes after, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And I'm in martial arts. We say, yes, ma'am, to me, and yes, sir. Like Jet said, I'm getting goosebumps even talking about that. That makes it so much easier to communicate. Have that same grace back and be really understanding. Again, so many times we don't see what is going on with someone. Again, stop the assumptions. And you'll hear me talk a little bit later about multiple listing and getting information. But so many of our properties say they're single family. Well, guess what? A single family, I mean, excuse me, not single family, but single level. And yeah, it's single level, but there's a step to get up. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm not real good about popping up, so I can't get up without somebody helping me. But guess what? I had a client that was very able-bodied, but if I took him to show a property in the evening, he had a stroke that didn't show. So what we call sundowners, as he walks up that step, he'll trip over. And how would I feel if my client trips and falls trying to get into a house? So again, if I hadn't asked the right questions, I wouldn't have known that. Don't assume.
Absolutely. I think, and it was funny on our one of our pre-talks, Karen and I both had get out of your own way, because it's our assumptions, it's our bias. We can call it implicit bias, we can call it explicit bias. It's bias because we have preconceived notions of how we think people are going to be. And, on the single story home aspect, I totally get it, because I moved to a single story home and thought, okay, my husband's in a wheelchair now. This will be okay. And I'm the one who's having to do the pushing and the lifting and all of that.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. My house is not wheelchair friendly. It is a single story, but it is not wheelchair friendly. And people would make the assumption, well, you're in a single story, so everything's cool. And it's like, well, it's better than if I had to try to haul him down the stairs, which I don't have to worry about that. But I ended up having to take him out the back door because just to get out of my entry was impossible. I almost threw him out of the chair, which is a very real thing. People can get hurt, and it would have hurt both of us. But these are things that a lot of realtors are like, well, it shouldn't be a problem, it's single story. Well, no, let the person make that determination. Same thing for working with older people. Don't make the assumption that, well, they're older, so their knees must be bad, so I'm not going to show them places that have stairs. And again, personal, story here. A good friend of mine is like, hey, I need to go buy a condo. And, what about this neighborhood? And I'm like, oh, those are 3-story units. You don't want anything to do with those. And he's like, well, I'm not going to rule them out. And what do? I rule them out for him. What did he end up buying? One of the 3-story units. And it's like, oh, Lisa, get out of your own way. Quit putting your ideas onto people. Same with working with older people and assuming that they're not tech friendly, when most of them can probably run circles around the average Gen Xer, if not younger. And don't assume that all millennials and Gen Z people are living on social media and constantly have access, to things. There's a lot of people that have cut themselves off knowing about, I need less screen time. I don't need to be on social media. They're tech savvy, but not as tech savvy as you think they are. Just because they're of a certain age doesn't mean that they fit that stereotype. And we need to be very, very careful when we're dealing with people about putting them in those monoliths. They are differently able, therefore they can't do this. They're a veteran, so therefore they have no money. You're an older person, therefore you are technically challenged. And that's not where things are right now. And we need to be a little bit more cognizant of how we're treating people, even though we're going to get into communication with these different groups of folks right now. And not only is this good information for dealing with different people in different communities, this is good information for dealing with anybody, because you don't know what somebody's going through. You don't know that person's personal challenges. You don't know if they're having a time right now processing something difficult emotionally, or if they're having mental issues, which is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of in today's day and age. we should be, willing to just say, you know what, I think this person needs a break. We need to give them a little grace. I can tell that this particular experience is wearing on them, regardless of their age, regardless of their ability, and regardless of, if they've served in the military or not. We're all going through a lot right now, and we need to give each other grace and get out of our own way. But when we talk about communication, that's a really important thing. And I touched a little bit on the different age groups, making those assumptions that older people don't text, older people don't know how to use DocuSign, younger people know all this stuff. And then what about those poor Gen Xers that everybody forgets about? Sorry, guys, it's that are kind of stuck out there with all of us. But, on communication, it's really important to have those discussions with your client. Don't make the assumption that older people don't want to talk. I mean, I'll proudly say I'm a senior citizen. I think earlier my age group was announced old somewhere. And you know what? I'll own that. I'm proud of my age, and I'm proud of what I'm able to do at my age and be technology savvy. And my favorite form of communication is text. I don't want you calling me. I want a text message. Send me a text message, and then if I can get back to you, I'll call you. But don't make an assumption, because I could have been living in a senior community for 10 years now, that I'm not able to do things just because of my age. And even when somebody's 85, 95, don't make that assumption, because you may find somebody who is suffering from early stages of dementia, that they're cognizant, but they're going to have trouble with certain things. And we need to know how to best communicate with those people. Karen, what about you? What's a really super important communication tip? You mentioned before the eye level, and treating people, letting them know you see them.
So just so everyone knows, I have a whole list of questions that I ask people that I'll share with you when we get there. But communication's everything, regardless of the type of client you're working with. And so I always ask them, what is the best way for me to communicate with you? And sometimes I always joke, you have to lead the witness. They don't quite know how to answer it. So then I'll say, would you rather me call your mobile? Do you want text? Do you want emails? Because everybody's different. It's irregardless of age. And, it's so important. We have a listing alerts and all kinds of information that we can send our clients. Again, I keep mentioning about MLS. We are working on, it's already there, but we need to get our California MLSs to use a way to understand anything that's accessible. So in other words, there's certain things that you can add. Jet mentioned what is their resources to fix the properties, but there's some things you can't fix. Like somebody with vision impaired may want a light home. Don't again assume that because they're vision impaired, they can't see. They sometimes really want light. Can't change that too much. Parking's a huge issue, especially someone in a walker or like me in a wheelchair. I break down my chair and drive everywhere, but I need to be able to open my door fully. Some of my friends have ramps in their in their car so they can roll out. So we need flat surfaces to park. So if I have a property that's got a downslope or an upslope, my client probably can't use it, and that would be an absolute fortune, if even possible, to change. So again, you got to ask all these questions. Don't assume. I have friends that are super good with their wheelchairs and probably can manage it.
Absolutely. And Jet, dealing with active military communication is probably going to be a little different than dealing with a veteran regarding communication. But what do you see when you're communicating? Because as a lender, you communicate a lot. And
Sure.
What are some of the things that you can give as tips to better serve the veteran and active military community?
It's as Karen said, you just you start by asking them mostly like, well, how they prefer to do their communication. And I mean it varies. a lot of them, I mean, if they are active duty, they prefer, texts and emails, not for any other reason, but because it allows them an opportunity to read it on their own time and then get back to me. Actually, one of the first questions I generally ask clients, veterans or not, or military or not, is do you plan to be out of town for any part of the transaction? Because if you do, please let me know now. Which I'm glad I started asking that, because there's at least one instance where a gentleman ended up like on a boat in the middle of the Pacific, and I was glad I was able to get what I needed from him before he left. But yeah, I mean, there do tend to be trends, like the younger people do prefer text, and they are very tech savvy, and they do send me everything that they need. But it's not to say that the older ones aren't either. In fact, nowadays everybody's super tech savvy. Like, it really doesn't matter. Some people still want the soft touch on the phone for peace of mind. They want to speak to me before making any decisions. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like everybody at this point is considerably more capable than people give them credit for. So.
Absolutely. And with the active military, it's very important, like you mentioned, where are you going to be? And if you're somewhere and something needs to be notarized, where are you going to be and how are we going to do this? Because that's the joy of where we are with technology in the real estate industry now, that you can basically do a transaction anywhere in the world, except for when it comes to being, having to deal with a notary. And having to be sure that your client's not going to end up in Okinawa or somewhere else, thinking that they're going to be able to close this. A lot of my past experiences is people didn't realize they were getting deployed as quickly as they got deployed.
Yeah.
And that kind of threw a couple of monkey wrenches in a couple of times, but just having the forethought of what could possibly happen here when we're dealing with an active military member.
Right. So it's actually funny. So I had an instance where I was doing a refinance for an active duty military member, and we knew that he was not going to be. He was going to be on a boat. He was going to be on a boat in the middle of the Pacific. And so what we did prior to him leaving was we got his wife a power of attorney so that she could sign documents on his behalf, which was all perfectly fine. What a lot of people don't realize is in those instances, there is one additional step. And I felt very silly doing it, but he laughed, which is okay. So when a power of attorney is used to do a refinance or something like that on a VA loan, we have to confirm that the veteran is still alive and well at the time of the loan funding. So I sent him a text message, and I said, we would just like to confirm that you're alive and well. And he texted me back and he's like, excuse me? And I was like, I know it sounds really silly, but we just need to confirm that you're alive and well so I can proceed with funding. He's like, I am both. Thank you for checking.
And this is the stuff that we encounter, and something else I want to bring up before we move on to questions and everything is, that if you're not aware, I'm sure all of our viewers here probably are aware that, military status, whether it's active military or veteran, is a protected class in California. And there's a lot of things that go along with that, especially when it comes to renting to someone who is active military. We do have a lot of renters in the area that are active military. And, in the past, I have personally heard, well, I don't know if I want to, rent to them because they can get deployed and leave. And then I got to go through this all over again. So I'm not going to rent to them. And yeah, it is true. They can get deployed and leave and break their lease legally because they are active military and are being deployed, and that there's nothing that they can do to control that. But if you discriminate against somebody saying you're active military and I'm not going to rent to you because you could get deployed at a moment's notice, that's discrimination. And I don't really think we want to go down that road if we can avoid that. So, just realize what these people are doing with their lives to, serve their country and keep us safe. Give them a little grace when it comes to rentals, and also to, that they are a protected class when it comes to receiving an offer. If you're just like, I don't want to deal with the VA loan, then guess what you're doing? You're discriminating because that protected class is eligible for that loan. So just a couple of reminders out there regarding VA loan benefits and how to properly take care of our active military personnel. And, you know, an active military doesn't just cover Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. What else does it cover, Jet? What other groups are in there?
I'm sorry, could you say so? Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Space Force now, I guess. Is that what you meant?
Yeah,
or
no, that's exactly what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
And does National Guard fall into that if they're like full
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, so National Guard does. It's a little more complicated to establish eligibility because so if you're in the traditional services, well, so sorry, if you're active duty, or if you've ever been active duty, we can simply go into the VA's portal and we can pull a certificate of eligibility with you. And so if you've served at any point in like probably the last 30 years, it's all in their system. So it's super easy to do. If you are, let's say, an older veteran that fought in, let's say, like the Vietnam War or something, then your certificate of eligibility might not be in the portal. Then we might have to do it a little bit more old school using like your DD 214, which is your discharge form showing that it was like an honorable discharge. And in that regard, that's what National Guard is kind of like as well. Because you have to have accumulated a certain amount of time, either um, um, either active or not. It's called a point system. So you would need to go get from like your supervising officer your NGB 22 and 23, which is basically a point statement, and then we can use the point statement to figure out if you're eligible. So yeah.
Well, and that kind of leads us into our next topic, which is, you know, what are questions that we should be asking people when we're working with them? You know, the client intake form that we should be doing. And Jen, I'm going to stick with you because I would like to. I hate to think, but I'm pretty sure that this is a thing. We do have a lot of people that are serving in the Coast Guard or the Space Force or whatever that don't even realize that they qualify for benefits, or people that are veterans that don't think that there's any benefits out there for them. What
Sure.
are some of the questions that you as a loan officer ask to find out this information? And also, how do you approach the topic of a possible disability? Because that does affect their benefits, that, you know, you don't have to pay the oh, dang it, I just lost what it is. All I know is subsequent use fee is 3.3%. That I remember. But you have
Yeah.
waivers for certain fees if you are disabled or percentage thereof. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, one of the questions that I do straightforwardly ask is, you know, if you've served in the forces, the armed forces, at any point. And it's important to ask because actually historically a lot of veterans were almost like discouraged from like using their benefits. You know, I mean, the most obvious one was like after World War II, like a lot of African Americans were discouraged from like using their benefits, to the point I think it's like 1 million of them were had benefits, were just unable to use them at all. But even more so, like recently, you know, they'll attempt to use their benefits to buy, and they'll just be told by, you know, a friend or a realtor or somebody that, oh, you're never going to get a VA loan accepted. You should get qualified conventionally. Like you'll never be able to like get a VA loan accepted. So they almost like try and shy away from it because they don't realize how good it is, unless they speak to, you know, like someone like me or possibly yourself who'll tell them that it's better.
Well, and I'm going to just interject at that point, because not all loan officers do or know how to do VA loans, correct? Is there any sort of certification or anything that a lender has to have to do VA?
So there's no certification. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it's like any other type of loan product. Like it's up to the individual loan officers if they want to learn. And you know, some loan officers just choose not to because, you know, well, it's not like a negative. Like sometimes if you just don't have that clientele or demographic in your area, you choose not to. So I mean, I'll be pretty transparent. if someone came to me for like a down payment assistance loan, I'd probably send them to one of my colleagues in the office and be like, like Mary's way better at this because she just is, or like Joe's way better at this. And it's not because I don't want to do it. It's just because I don't want to mess up. So I'm one of those people that'll hand it off. Not every loan officer is like that. Like a lot of them will be like, oh, you want a VA loan? And in your brain, you're thinking, I don't know how to do this. You're like, it'd be better like anything else that I already know how to do. Like, so that is, I feel like a lot of loan officers do stuff like that. And I mean, again, it was very surprising to me because since I did so many VA loans when I started, I just assumed everybody knew how to do VA loans. And then I came to Orange County, and I remember I was actually having a conversation with a loan officer that I'd known for like probably 2 years at that point that I respected. He had been in the industry at least 10 years more than I had. And I considered him like a good loan officer and a good friend. And he asked me a question regarding VA loans. And I remember thinking, you don't know anything about VA loans, do you? Because I remember thinking the way he asked me the question, like, that's a very obvious answer. Like, and when I discussed it further with him, I realized that he actually did know VA loans. Like he just didn't. So I think if you are using your VA benefit, it is beneficial to find someone who has done a lot of VA loans. There are like pseudo certifications out there. Like I believe there's a group called like Vetted VA that says, oh, we like certify our loan officers who want to join. But honestly, it's just, I think it's like a $200 fee. And then they'll let you put like a little shiny thing at the end of your email signature.
Well, and how do you, when you're having that conversation, once you've already established that the person does qualify to use VA benefits, how do you touch on do you have a qualifying disability?
Yeah. So usually I ask that question in a so I'll try and pull their certificate of eligibility. And if they're exempt from the funding fee because they have a disability, it should be right there on that certificate of eligibility. But sometimes it's not, or sometimes they've started the process after. So I will usually ask the question in there are a lot of ways that you could be exempt from the funding fee. Some of them would be, and then I'll like start listing them off, including, like disability rating. Do you qualify for the exemption? Like, I'm not asking them if they have a disability. I'm just saying, like, if you have a disability, you're exempt. Are you exempt? And if they say they're exempt, then I might ask for documentation to show why they would be exempt. And ideally, at that point, they'll give me their disability paperwork. So.
Fantastic. Karen, and I know working with the differently abled community, what are some of the things that we should know for questions to better serve our clients from a client intake standpoint? What do you suggest?
So first of all, fair housing, I would use the same list. And personally, I had a written list. I may change up the questions in front of me depending on the client. Some would apply, some wouldn't. But I'm either printing it out and writing it and asking my client if they mind if I take notes. Trust me, they love it. So follow that. I'm going to start with a question. I may vary depending on the client, but so many of my athletic friends are, again, I mentioned are young. They don't want help. Guess what? I'm smart enough to know I'll take any help I can get. I want to protect my body. I've already beat it up enough. And so just asking, don't just, again, assumption, don't just grab and push them. I'll be happy, but others may be mad at you. What can I do to help? Or at least say, please ask me if there's anything I can do to help. And then I would go on, and again, I use this for any client. Describe your ideal home. It may be way out there and it's not one you're going to find, but it gives you ideas of their priority. Then again, I would ask, how do you discover homes that will work for you? Gives you the idea of the process and what is important to them. What goes into making a home better for you? What would make it more accessible? Again, we're all differently abled. I have a client that was he is still a swimmer, but he's in a wheelchair. He's tall, super long arms. He is comfortable making all kinds of dinners in his standard height kitchen. Me, can't really cook very well on a standard height. Plus, I have a gas stove. There's no way I can even reach it. Again, ask those questions. Layer those questions sometimes. Ask them a little more when they tell you some things. If it doesn't make sense, that's okay. Just ask kind of a standard extra question. How do you use your rooms like the kitchen and the bathroom? Again, we're typically silent. We're always fighting for our rights. So we may not tell our rights. We don't fight for our rights because we're so busy taking care of ourselves. But they may tell you that I need a certain turn radius in the bathroom. I may need a certain height. Again, sometimes you may have to layer it to get a little bit more information. How do you have caregivers? Important to know. Are they going to be living there? Are they coming? Do they have help? Maybe a kitchen won't matter because they have caregivers. Do you have any special requirements for a home? Again, they should tell you. Usually they're open, especially the more trust you build up.
And I'm going to stop right there, Karen, because there was something you shared at a previous talk you did that that just really stuck with me. And it's again the assumptions that we make. And one of the things is the size of door frames and the size of wheelchairs being one size fits all. Can you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
Absolutely. I always joke, I'm the only active female I know that's pear-shaped, which means my manual chair is wider than most of my, especially girlfriends, guy friends to boot. I need a 28-inch open frame. The door may be 28 inches, but guess what? The frame sticks out and I can't, I've been to hotels, cruises, so on and so forth. I can't even get in the door. So again, most of my friends could in a chair. Walkers are wider too. So again, find out if they give you some kind of indication. It's okay to say, is there a standard opening that's you need? We don't mind those
Absolutely.
kind of questions. Again, assumptions aren't a good thing. Ask more questions if you need it. Transportation is really important. There are types of transportation. I can get in and out of, lower taxis and everything else. Other people can't, especially an automated chair. Ask them if they use public transportation. They may need to be on a train route, and again, all of our clients can fit into that. You mentioned earlier millennials. They want to be a downtown. They want to be right by the train.
Yeah.
Ask those
Yeah.
questions. Otherwise, you may lose your client because you're not asking the right things.
Well, and I think what you said about the layering on, I mean, that's the really important part because some of the questions that I ask is tell me what are the things that are must haves for your home, and then tell me the things that would be really nice to have. And when you bring it that way, then it's like, okay, well, I need this because of this, or I need this because of that. And then also too, something that we don't realize on the ageism front, besides assuming that older folks can't do stairs or whatever, we have a younger demographic that some are choosing to have families and some aren't. But we look at a young couple, oh well, they're going to have kids, so we want to be sure that we get a yard and blah 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 blah. And I certainly don't flat out ask how many kids do you have, and if you don't have any, are you planning, because that's none of my friggin' business. However, I can, ask questions like, do you entertain a lot? If you entertain, do you cook inside or do you cook outside? Do you have a pet now? I'll ask about pets because I don't think there's any, protected pet classes, but we're not going to go into service animals and all that right now. That's a conversation for another day. But, do you have a pet? If you don't, are you planning on having one? And then that usually will have the questions will come, oh yeah, we're thinking of, enlarging our family and we'd like a yard for the kids to play in, or I don't care because I ain't having kids and I ain't having a dog, so we can't make these assumptions that every wheelchair fits through every door. Every young couple is going to have kids. Every veteran has no money, and every old person doesn't know how to use technology and can't do stairs. but it's part of that getting out of our way, which is the biggest problem we have. But ask the open questions that you would ask anybody. But then when you get the answers, layer them on and keep, letting them know it's okay to talk about this. What do how can I better serve you? How can I better serve you? And it may be a little awkward, but boy, it is really appreciated. And before I close this up, I'm going to do a last call for questions out there. If anybody has any questions, put them in the Q&A. If we have any time, we'll get back to them. If we don't have time, we will get you offline. But while we're waiting to see if anybody has questions.
Actually, if I can piggyback.
Oh, go right ahead.
Question, do you have any special requirements? And you mentioned access. You really need to be able to get in the front door and the back door, or at least 2 different doors. Again, safety, fire, but so many want a backyard because they hang out. They don't go maybe to the park. They want to hang in their backyard. So
Yeah.
Find out their needs.
Absolutely. And that goes for everybody.
And Chet hit it. You really, really need to make sure if they have been working with a lender, and all your clients obviously should be reaching out to a lender unless they're all cash, truly all cash. There are special programs like the VA program that they may qualify for. So get a lender that, if you can use Chet, use him. If you're not in his area, find somebody that knows how to work with these extra benefits. It's huge. And you can do that by whoever they tell you they're working with. Call them and ask the questions.
Absolutely. Well, and how we're going to wrap this up is, what is the one takeaway you want our participants today to take with them from this talk? And Karen, I'll start with you.
Again, everyone's different. Ask the right questions. And to me, the most important is we're trying to get the MLS data general so we can know that a house is visitable, because nothing worse if you haven't previewed, you go to a property and the client can't get in the door or can't get through the house, like the one behind me. I only could get in the first level. So make sure that you get the right information, and please encourage your MLS to use the new RESO standards that aren't using measurements, but it will, hopefully any property may or may not be accessible, but there's data points that would help us if we're working with anybody that is differently abled.
Fantastic. Chet, what about your one takeaway for today?
Just keep an open mind. Don't make assumptions about anything, and in fact, go one step further and educate yourself. So, if you get an offer about anything, not necessarily just a VA loan, FHA loan, bank statement, whatever comes across your desk, if you don't know enough about it, just be enough of an adult to be like, I do not know enough about this, and I should really call somebody who does, either the agent on the other side or the lender, or heck, call your own personal friend who has like information about that kind of stuff, and just educate yourself so that everybody gets an equal chance.
Lisa,
fantastic. We do have a question in the chat.
May I mention, I don't think it went out. If anybody can join, we have the honor of having the moderator, Regina Singh, who will be doing the differently abled, it's a CAR, differently abled affinity group meeting Thursday, August 21st from 1 to 2. Look at CAR and join in. You'll get a lot more great information. Thanks, Lisa, for letting me plug that.
Oh, no worries, because it is an awesome group to come listen to. I will address the one question, and Karen, this is towards you. For a disabled person, is it better to look at them and acknowledge their disability, or just act as we would with a person without a disability?
Fabulous question. The most important thing is always treat them with respect. Talk to them like you would talk to anybody else. And, even people that have difficulty speaking, somebody that had a stroke maybe have difficulty speaking. Try to match their needs. Like I said, I complimented Lisa because she would get down on my level. do what you can to make them feel comfortable. If you're noticing a bad reaction, back off. But I hate to say it this way, treat everybody the same, but again, try to match their needs, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. That is great advice. And with that, we're going to wrap things up. My only takeaway to the group out there is get out of your own way. Don't make assumptions, and everybody's not a monolith. So, with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a day here. I want to say thank you to Jet and thank you to Karen. You guys are both just doing yeoman's work out there. Helping your community, and we're all better for it. So thank you all so much, and thank you all for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful day.